The Galactic Nightmare database credits humans with creating fear-based social bonding. Part 1. Doctor stared at her with all four of her eyes narrowed in confusion. The scientist had spent 40 years studying behavioral patterns across the galaxy, and nothing in her experience prepared her for what she was reading about humans. The assignment seemed simple enough when it arrived from the Galactic Psychological Archives. A new species had joined the community, and their cultural database contained anomalies that needed investigation. Standard procedure. Had done this work dozens of times before. But humans were different. The first red flag appeared in their entertainment category. Every species had entertainment, of course. They enjoyed complex musical harmonies that could last for weeks. They liked competitive games that tested strategic thinking. They themselves preferred philosophical debates conducted in absolute silence. Humans, however, had something called horror. Pulled up the definition from the human database. Horror was a genre of entertainment designed specifically to frighten the audience. She read the definition 3 times, certain her translator was malfunctioning. Why would any species deliberately seek out fear? Fear was a survival mechanism, an unpleasant biological response to danger. It made the heart race, the muscles tense, the mind focus on escape or combat. Every known species in the galaxy tried to avoid fear whenever possible. Yet humans created entire industries around it. She dove deeper into the research. Humans wrote books designed to scare readers. They made films with frightening images and sounds. They told stories around fires specifically to make each other afraid. They built elaborate structures called haunted houses, where people paid money to be frightened by strangers in costumes. They even created interactive experiences called horror games, where participants voluntarily placed themselves in simulated dangerous situations. The database contained thousands of examples. Stories about monsters, ghosts, aliens, demons, serial killers, supernatural entities, and cosmic horrors. Humans seemed endlessly creative in finding new things to fear and new ways to package that fear for consumption. Called her research assistant, a young named X who specialized in abnormal psychology. "I need you to review this data," she said, forwarding the human entertainment files. "Tell me if I'm misunderstanding something fundamental about this species." X returned an hour later, his face plates showing the purple tinge of confusion. "I thought my translator was broken," he admitted. "I ran the data through 3 different verification systems. It's accurate. Humans really do this." "But why?" asked. "What possible evolutionary advantage could come from seeking fear?" "I don't know," X said, "but I think we need to observe them directly. Reading about it isn't enough. We need to see it happen." Agreed. She submitted a request to the Galactic Council for permission to visit Earth and conduct behavioral observations. The Council approved immediately, clearly as curious about this anomaly as she was. 2 weeks later, and her team of 3 researchers stood in the lobby of a human movie theater in a city called Chicago. The humans had been incredibly welcoming when she explained her research purpose. The theater manager, a friendly woman named Jennifer, had even suggested they observe what she called a horror movie marathon, an event where humans watched 5 scary films back to back through the night. "You picked a good night," Jennifer said as she led them to their observation post in the projection booth. "We're showing classic horror films, really popular ones. The theater is almost sold out." Watch through the booth window as humans filed into the theater below. They came in groups, mostly young adults, laughing and talking excitedly. Their body language showed no signs of stress or anxiety. Many carried large containers of popcorn and sweet drinks. "They seem happy," X observed. "Are they aware of what's about to happen?" "Oh, they know," Jennifer said with a smile. "Some of these people have seen these movies dozens of times. They love them." The lights dimmed. The first movie began. Translator struggled with the title, The Thing. The film opened with a helicopter chasing a dog across Antarctic snow. Within minutes, the dog transformed into something horrific, a writhing mass of flesh and teeth that attacked a group of humans trapped in a research station. The creature could imitate any living being perfectly, creating paranoia and distrust among the survivors. Watch both the screen and the audience. Her scientific training kept her focused even as the images disturbed her on a primal level. The humans, however, reacted in ways she never expected. When something scary happened on screen, they didn't run, they didn't fight, they didn't freeze in isolated terror. Instead, they grabbed each other. They held hands with friends. They clutched the shoulders of the person sitting next to them. Some buried their faces in their companion's shoulder but kept watching through their fingers. And they made sounds. Not distress calls or warning shouts, but something else entirely. Nervous laughter, playful screams, excited whispers predicting what might happen next. When a particularly frightening scene ended, the entire audience seemed to exhale together, then laugh at their own reactions. "Look at row 12, X whispered, pointing to a group of 5 humans who had clearly arrived as strangers. They sat with empty seats between them at the start. Now, 3 movies in, they sat pressed together, sharing popcorn and commenting quietly to each other about the films. "They're bonding," said softly, her scientific mind racing. "The fear is bringing them together instead of driving them apart." She watched more carefully. During intense scenes, humans leaned toward each other. During quieter moments, they discussed what they had just seen, comparing reactions, laughing about who got scared the most. Several people left their original seats to sit closer to others, forming new social clusters based on shared responses to the films. By the 5th movie, the audience behaved like a single cohesive unit. They gasped together. They laughed together. They shouted warnings at the characters on screen together, even though they knew the characters couldn't hear them. When something surprising happened, strangers turned to each other with wide eyes and excited grins, sharing the experience with whoever was closest. When the marathon ended at 6 in the morning, watched the humans file out of the theater. They looked exhausted, but their body language showed deep satisfaction. Many exchanged contact information with people they had been sitting near. Several groups made plans to meet for breakfast together. 2 humans who had been strangers when they arrived were now holding hands. Jennifer appeared beside. "So, what did you think?" "I think," said slowly, "that humans have done something no other species has managed. You've turned a threat response into a social tool." "A social tool?" Jennifer asked. "Every species experiences fear when threatened," explained. "It's biological, universal, but fear drives us apart. It makes us aggressive toward each other or causes us to scatter. It breaks social bonds under stress. But humans have created artificial fear in safe environments, and instead of breaking bonds, it creates them." "Huh," Jennifer said. "I never thought about it that way. I just know that scary movies are more fun with friends." Spent the rest of her Earth visit observing more examples. She attended a horror book club where humans discussed frightening novels. She visited an escape room where groups solved puzzles while being chased by actors in monster costumes. She even, at X's insistence, went through a haunted house attraction. That experience proved most enlightening. Physiology meant she perceived the fake threats differently than humans did, but she watched her team members' reactions carefully. X grabbed another researcher's arm during a particularly startling moment. When they emerged, all 3 researchers stood closer together than normally preferred. "It worked on us too," X said, sounding amazed. "I felt afraid, but I also felt connected to both of you in a way I didn't before." Compiled her findings into a report. Her conclusion was clear. Humans had discovered a form of social bonding that was completely unique in the known galaxy. By creating controlled fear experiences and facing them together, humans built trust, strengthened relationships, and formed connections with strangers. They had weaponized vulnerability itself, turning it into their greatest social strength. She titled her report, "Adversarial Bonding Through Recreational Terror," and submitted it to the Galactic Psychological Archives with a recommendation for immediate further study. The Galactic Council read her report with deep skepticism. The chair of the Psychological Committee, an ancient named, sent a response within hours. Your findings are interesting but require more rigorous proof. The implications are too significant to accept based on observational data alone. Design a controlled experiment. Show us that this phenomenon is real and reproducible. Smiled, an expression her species usually reserved for moments of intellectual triumph. She had hoped they would ask for exactly that. Part 2. Stood in the Galactic Research Station's largest observation chamber and reviewed her experimental design one final time. The room was divided into 12 sections, each calibrated for a different species' environmental needs. Temperature, atmosphere, gravity, light spectrum, everything adjusted to keep the participants comfortable. Well, as comfortable as they could be during a fear study. The Galactic Council had given her unprecedented resources for this experiment. 12 species would participate, including humans. Each species would send 3 volunteers to face graduated fear stimuli in controlled conditions, would measure physiological stress responses, behavioral changes, and most importantly, social cohesion before, during, and after fear exposure. The other researchers thought she was wasting resources. You're trying to prove that humans are special, her colleague Dr. Morpheus had said dismissively. Every species thinks they're unique. Usually they're wrong. But wasn't trying to prove humans were special. She was trying to understand them. And if her hypothesis was correct, understanding them might change everything the galaxy knew about social psychology. The first participants arrived, had been careful to select volunteers who didn't know each other beforehand. 3, 3, 3, and representatives from 9 other species. The 3 humans stood out immediately, not because of their appearance, but because of their demeanor. While other species volunteers stood nervously separate from each other, the humans had already started talking to each other by the time they reached the observation chamber. The shortest human, who introduced herself as Maria, had somehow learned basic greetings in 6 different languages during the transport to the station. She was attempting to pronounce a hello phrase, butchering it badly, but the participants seemed charmed rather than offended. The tallest human, a man named David, was asking everyone about there with genuine curiosity. The third human stood quietly but smiled warmly at anyone who made eye contact. Participants, please take your positions, announced through the translation system. Each species moved to their designated section of the chamber. The experiment began with baseline measurements. No fear stimuli, just normal conditions while recorded stress hormones, heart rates, and behavioral patterns. As expected, most species maintained careful distances from their same species companions. They stood in a perfect triangle, equally spaced. They positioned themselves back to back, ready to watch all directions. They stayed close but avoided touching. The humans stood in a loose cluster, occasionally touching each other's arms or shoulders while talking quietly. Phase 2 introduced mild fear stimuli. The lights dimmed. Strange sounds echoed through the chamber, different frequencies for different species, each one calibrated to trigger primal unease. Holographic shadows moved at the edge of vision. Watched the monitors carefully. They spread further apart, each one focused on their own survival. They became visibly aggressive, their communication patterns showing increased hostility. They released stress pheromones that made them avoid each other. Across all 12 species, the pattern repeated. Fear drove them apart. All except one species. The humans moved closer together. Who had been the quietest suddenly became verbal, making observations about the shadows. Did you see that one? Definitely heading left. I'll watch this side if you watch that side. Maria and David immediately responded, creating a simple system where all 3 watched different directions. Their heart rates elevated, showing they were genuinely afraid, but their cooperation increased. Phase 3 escalated the stimuli. Holographic predators rushed toward participants. The sounds became louder, more threatening. The temperature dropped. Environmental hazards appeared, forcing participants to navigate through darkness and obstacles. Two volunteers signaled they needed to stop. The stress was too much. Had expected this and allowed them to exit. Across the chamber, attacked one of his companions, mistaking them for a threat in the darkness. The experiment had to be paused whilst medical team treated minor injuries. The humans, meanwhile, had linked arms. They moved through the obstacles together, constantly communicating. When David tripped, and Maria immediately helped him up, not even hesitating despite the holographic threats surrounding them. When they reached a particularly frightening section, Maria made a joke that's translator couldn't quite process, but both men laughed, and their stress hormones actually decreased momentarily despite being in active danger. The experiment continued for 3 hours. By the end, had to stop early because 7 of the 12 species showed signs of psychological damage from the fear exposure. They were actively hostile to each other. They refused to be in the same room. 2 species had participants that wouldn't speak at all, shut down by the stress. The humans were tired, still showing elevated stress markers. But when opened the chamber door, they walked out together, supporting each other. They immediately asked if everyone else was okay and spent 20 minutes checking on participants from other species, offering comfort even though they were exhausted themselves. Fascinating, X muttered, reviewing the data. Look at their cortisol levels. Still elevated, but the oxytocin spike is enormous. They bonded more during the experiment than any other species bonded during the entire month before it. But the real proof came in the days after. Continued observing all participants as they recovered from the experiment. Most species wanted isolation. They avoided their fellow participants, associating them with the traumatic experience. Several required counseling. The Galactic Council was already discussing compensation for the psychological distress. The 3 humans, however, kept meeting for meals. On day 2, suggested they watch a movie together. David found a human horror film in the station's entertainment database. Maria made popcorn using the human food synthesizer. Got permission to observe. She found all 3 humans in a recreation room, watching a film about a supernatural entity that killed people in their dreams. They sat pressed together on a couch designed for 5, sharing the popcorn, jumping at scary scenes, laughing at their own reactions. "Why are you doing this?" finally asked. "You experienced genuine fear during my experiment. Why seek more?" Paused the film. Because it was fun, actually. Once we knew we were safe, I mean. The experiment was scary, yeah, but we got through it together. That felt good. This, he gestured at the screen, is just an extension of that. We're friends now. We went through something intense together. But you could simply spend time together in peaceful activities, pointed out. We could, Maria agreed. But there's something about being scared together that's special. It's like when you're scared, you can't fake anything. You're vulnerable. And when someone stays with you while you're vulnerable, doesn't run away or get aggressive, you know you can trust them. Really trust them. Besides, David added, this is just practice, right? The galaxy is a scary place sometimes. Better to get used to being scared with friends in a safe way than fall apart when real danger shows up. Returned to her office and stared at her data for hours. The humans were right. They were practicing vulnerability. They were building trust through controlled adversity. They were preparing for real dangers by facing fake ones together, and in the process, forming bonds stronger than anything other species achieved through peaceful interaction. She expanded her analysis and found more evidence. Human military units used fear-based training extensively. Their most elite forces went through deliberately terrifying experiences together as part of team building. Human children told scary stories at camps and sleepovers, learning early that fear shared was fear diminished. Human couples watched horror movies on dates, using the fear response to accelerate bonding. Across human culture, fear wasn't something to avoid. It was a tool, a social technology developed over. Compiled her findings into a comprehensive report. She included physiological data, behavioral observations, cross-species comparisons, and historical analysis of human cultural practices. Her conclusion was undeniable. Humans had evolved a unique response to fear that allowed them to bond through adversity rather than fracture under it. She submitted the report to the Galactic Psychological Archives with a new title: Humans, the only species to weaponize shared vulnerability as a social advantage. 3 days later, she received notification that her findings had been peer-reviewed and officially accepted into the archives. The Galactic Nightmare Database, as humans jokingly called it, now credited humanity with the discovery of fear-based social bonding. The notification included a message from the Galactic Council. Your research has attracted significant attention. The military command has requested a meeting. They have questions about practical applications. Felt a chill run through her body, her species equivalent of worried anticipation. The military wanted to turn human psychology into a tool. She looked at the message from that had arrived that morning. He and the other human participants wanted to know if she would join them for something called a haunted house experience that human tourists had set up on the station. Found herself typing a response without fully thinking it through. Yes, I would like to try it. If the military wanted to use human fear bonding methods, she needed to understand them completely. And there was only one way to truly understand: experience it herself. Part 3. The conference room at Military Command Headquarters felt deliberately intimidating. Suspected this was intentional. High ceilings, harsh lighting, and walls displaying the military's long history of peacekeeping operations across the galaxy. 5 generals sat across from her, their face plates arranged in expressions of serious interest. General X, the highest-ranking military official, spoke first. Doctor, your research on human fear bonding has created quite a stir. We've reviewed your data extensively. We believe it might solve a critical problem we face. What problem? Asked, though she had a good idea already. Multi-species unit cohesion, X said bluntly. We recruit peacekeepers from 30 different species. Traditional team-building methods fail because different species have incompatible social needs. Bond through shared silence. Bond through competition. Bond through chemical exchange. When we try to build cohesive units, we end up with fragmented groups that work together poorly in crisis situations. Another general, unnamed or leaned forward. Last year, we lost a peacekeeping team during a rescue operation on Prime. They had trained together for months, but when crisis hit, they reverted to species-specific behaviors. The scattered to assess individually. The fought each other for leadership. The waited for chemical consensus. By the time they organized, the hostages were dead. Felt the weight of those deaths. You want to use human fear bonding methods to create cohesion. We want to try, X said. If controlled fear experiences can make humans bond regardless of previous relationships, perhaps it can make different species bond despite their biological differences. The method might not work cross-species, cautioned. My experiments showed other species respond to fear by fracturing, not bonding. But they were alone with their own kind, or pointed out. What if we mix species together? What if we added humans to the groups to model the bonding behavior? Considered this. It was risky, potentially traumatizing for participants, but if it worked, it could save lives. I would need human consultants. This is their expertise, not mine. We anticipated that, X said. He gestured and the door opened. Walked in, followed by 2 other humans didn't recognize. They wore casual civilian clothes but carried themselves with military bearing. Grinned when he saw her. Hey, Doc, the generals contacted me about your research. I figured you'd want someone you knew on this project. This isn't a movie marathon, said. This is military training. People could get hurt. Which is exactly why you need us, said one of the other humans, a woman with short gray hair. I'm Sarah, retired U.S. Marine Corps, combat instructor for 20 years. If you're going to scare soldiers from different species, you need someone who understands both fear and military psychology. The third human, a younger man, nodded. And I'm Alex Torres. I designed haunted attractions for 10 years before joining the diplomatic corps. I know how to calibrate fear experiences for maximum impact with minimum trauma. X looked at, will you lead this project, Doctor? You understand the science better than anyone. Thought about the haunted house she had gone through with the week before. She had been genuinely frightened. She had grabbed X's arm at one point, something rarely did, and afterward she had felt closer to both and X than she had to colleagues she had worked with for years. Yes, she said, but we do this carefully, small groups first, extensive monitoring, and we stop immediately if anyone shows signs of real trauma. The project began 3 weeks later, and the human consultants designed what they called a fear-calibrated training environment. It was essentially a massive haunted house, but each section was carefully tuned to frighten specific species in ways that challenged without overwhelming. The first test group consisted of 12 volunteers from 6 species, including 3 humans. Sarah had insisted the humans participate. You can't expect others to do something you won't do yourself, she explained. That's basic leadership. Alex had created a scenario involving a derelict spaceship with failing life support, equipment malfunctions, and mysterious entities moving through the darkness. Each species would find different aspects frightening, but everyone would be scared of something. Remember, Sarah told the group before they entered, stick together, help each other. The goal isn't to not be scared. The goal is to work through the fear as a unit. Watch through monitors as the group entered the mock spaceship. Within minutes, the pattern she dreaded began. The move to separate corners, the became aggressive, the released distress pheromones. But then did something simple. When a named aura started to move away, gently touched her shoulder. Hey, I'm scared too. Stay with us. His voice was calm, his body language non-threatening. Aura hesitated, then stayed. When a soldier named snapped aggressively at a Sarah stepped between them. Save it for the scary stuff, not each other. You're on the same team. Her tone was firm but not hostile. Back down, surprised that a human had challenged him without triggering his combat instincts. The group moved deeper into the scenario. The fear escalated. Strange sounds, moving shadows, sudden equipment failures that plunged sections into darkness. Saw species-specific panic responses starting to emerge. Then one of a young soldier named, began to have a full panic attack, freezing completely. The traditional response would be for others to either leave behind or become aggressive due to the stress pheromones flooding the area. Instead, a soldier named approached together. Spoke calmly, using techniques Sarah had taught him about panic management. Following's example, stood close by, offering physical support without touching, respecting space preferences but clearly present. You're okay, kept saying. We're here, we're not leaving, take your time. After 2 minutes, recovered enough to continue. The group moved forward, but something had shifted. They stayed closer together. When the next scare came, a holographic entity that rushed at them, they didn't scatter. The soldiers positioned themselves protectively in front of smaller species. They coordinated their observations without needing to separate. The shared proximity warnings through chemical signals but directed them outward, toward threats, not inward at each other. By the time they exited the training environment 90 minutes later, they moved as a unit. Exhausted, still showing elevated stress markers, but together. The real test came in the days after. Observed them carefully, looking for the breakdown she had seen in her earlier experiments. The withdrawal, the hostility, the trauma. It didn't come. Instead, the 12 soldiers started eating meals together. They trained together voluntarily. The aggressive was observed teaching Aura, some of his species' combat techniques. The who had panicked began sharing chemical compounds that promoted group calm during their sessions. The humans had done what hoped they would. They had modeled bonding behavior during fear, and other species had learned to copy it. Sarah reviewed the data with, "The trust scores are incredible. These 12 work better together after 3 months than units that have trained together for 2 years." The program expanded. More groups, more species, more complex scenarios. Not every attempt succeeded. Some species simply couldn't overcome their biological responses to fear, but the success rate was far higher than anyone expected. 70% of mixed species units that went through fear-based bonding showed dramatic improvements in cohesion and crisis response. Within a year, fear bonding training was standard for all peacekeeping forces. Within 2 years, other species militaries began adopting similar programs. The military invited Sarah to design scenarios specifically for their aggressive response patterns. They developed chemical assist protocols that helped their soldiers maintain group cohesion during fear exposure. But the most surprising development came from outside the military. A human entrepreneur named Park contacted with a proposal. "You've proven fear bonding works for military units, but what about civilians? What about diplomacy?" "What do you mean?" asked. "Think about it," said, her enthusiasm infectious. "Half the conflicts in the galaxy come from species not trusting each other. What if we could accelerate trust building between diplomatic corps, between species representatives, between regular citizens? Not through years of careful interaction, but through shared fear experiences that create instant connection." Saw where this was going. You want to create commercial fear bonding facilities. Not just commercial, therapeutic, diplomatic, social. Humans have been doing this for fun for thousands of years. Now you've proven it works for building real bonds. Let's use it to bring the galaxy together. The first intergalactic haunted attraction opened on a neutral station near the galactic core. It was called Nightmare Nexus and was designed by Alex Torres with input from psychologists from 20 species. The attraction offered different fear experiences calibrated for different species, with mixed species groups encouraged. Critics called it exploitative. "You're profiting from fear," a ethics committee member complained. "No," countered, surprised to find herself defending the attraction. "We're teaching people that fear doesn't have to isolate them. That's worth far more than any profit." The attraction was fully booked for 3 years within weeks of opening. More facilities followed. Haunted hotels, fear challenge courses, horror film festivals that attracted audiences from across the galaxy. Every facility had human consultants who taught other species the key principle: face the fear together, support each other through it, bond through shared vulnerability. 5 years after its initial research, the Galactic Psychological Archives hosted a symposium on fear-based social bonding. Representatives from 40 species attended. The central question wasn't whether humans' fear bonding worked anymore. That was proven beyond doubt. The question was how to best implement it across diverse populations. Stood at the podium looking out at the audience. She saw sitting in the front row along with Sarah and Alex. She saw Aura, the soldier from the first test group, now an instructor in the fear bonding program. She saw the who had been so aggressive, now teaching mixed species units how to channel fear into cooperation. 5 years ago, said, I thought humans were strange for seeking fear. I thought they had developed an odd cultural quirk that set them apart. I was wrong. They didn't develop a quirk. They developed a technology. A social technology that works across species boundaries, across cultural differences, across all the divisions that usually keep us apart. She paused, making eye contact with, who smiled encouragingly. Humans taught us that vulnerability doesn't mean weakness. That being afraid together is stronger than being fearless alone. That shared adversity, even artificial adversity, builds bonds that peaceful coexistence never quite achieves. They taught us that trust isn't built through calm discussion or careful diplomacy alone. Sometimes it's built in darkness, in fear, in those moments when you reach for someone and they reach back. After the symposium, found waiting in the hall, "The Nightmare Nexus is opening a new experience next week," he said, "supposed to be their most advanced one yet. Multi-level, species-mix challenges, really sophisticated fear calibration." "Are you asking me to go?" asked. "I am. Sarah and Alex are coming. Aura and two. Even though she made us promise to stay with her the whole time, we thought you should be there. You're part of the team now." Felt something unfamiliar, a warm sensation that her species associated with belonging. She had spent her entire career studying social bonds from the outside, documenting how other species connected. Now humans had pulled her into their circle, shown her that even a scientist who preferred solitude could find strength in connection. "Yes," she said, "I'll come, but I'm warning you, I still grab people when I'm scared." Laughed, "That's kind of the whole point, Doc." They walked toward the station's transport hub together, discussing the new attraction, placing bets on who would scream first. Around them, the station bustled with activity. Species that had once barely tolerated each other now worked side by side, their bonds forged through shared fear, maintained through genuine friendship. Humans hadn't just taught the galaxy to bond through fear. They had taught them that connection required vulnerability, that trust required risk, and that sometimes the best way to bring people together was to remind them that, in the darkness, everyone gets scared. And everyone, no matter what species they belonged to, needed someone to hold onto when the shadows moved.